Let's stay with Ukraine and the back and forth now about that recent missile strike in Poland that killed 2 innocent farmers. Even though the UN and Biden both said that Ukraine accidentally fired it, Zelensky refuses to budge. He still claims Russia fired it. But now there's a whole new blame game between Russia and Ukraine that fired up over the weekend online. This as shelling resumed between the two countries yesterday. Explosions reported near an active nuclear power plant. Of course, Ukraine, very quick to accuse Russia of an intentional attack. Russia doing the opposite, blah, 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 the back and forth. Now, also over the weekend, shocking footage began circulating online that appears to show what may amount to a major war crime committed by Ukraine. It involves Ukrainian soldiers executing Russian soldiers who had just surrendered. Now, I'm going to put a warning out there for some of you. You might find this video graphic and disturbing, but remember, war is hell, and the atrocities of war should not be censored. And as a veteran, it's something I don't budge on. So if you think the video might offend you, look away, grab a cocktail, mute it. It's going to take a couple seconds, but we have to show you this. As you see the footage, it shows Russian troops being brought in, surrendering, being put down on the ground by Ukrainian soldiers. They're told to lay face down, hands behind their back. Apparently, one of the Russian soldiers, though, doesn't want to go that easily. He decides to turn around and open fire on the Ukrainian troops. What you will see in the next shots are the upsetting. This is drone footage. Seconds after that sole soldier tried to shoot at the Ukrainians. These are the Russian soldiers now lying face down, all shot in the head. These men were killed execution style. There's no doubt about it. The Ukrainian media, though, is putting a spin on the whole incident. It's important to note, though, that all the Russian troops that were killed are lying in the same position as the previous video. And because one soldier refused to surrender, the Ukrainians then executed all of them, which is folks, this is a pure violation of the Geneva Convention, making it a war crime. I'm not making an excuse for either side. We're just reporting on facts here. Now, of course, within seconds, minutes of the video dropping online, both Russia and Ukraine started the blame game, pointing fingers. Russia calling for an investigation into Ukraine executing their troops, and Ukraine looking for an investigation saying that Russia was faking that surrender. Joining us now to weigh in on the latest, the war between Ukraine and Russia, and also the connection with FTX and the money laundering, which I firmly think it was, retired Colonel Doug Macgregor. Doug, thanks for coming back on the program. Where do we begin? With the money trail or with this, shocking video?
I think your viewers need to understand that the shocking videos were taken by Ukrainian soldiers of other Ukrainian soldiers committing the atrocity. That's really what's important here. These are not videos that originated with the Russians. These came from Ukrainian soldiers who were simply filming what they saw happening. And that's a very important thing to understand. The second part is what the Russians have asked for, and they've done this before, is for the United Nations and a third party to come in and examine these things. We have never done that. And the Ukrainians have never allowed anyone from the outside to come in and see anything unless they had control of the people. So as a result, the accusations against the Russians have never been validated. And I suspect that this is the tip of the iceberg, because we know that the so-called Azov Nazis have a long track record of this kind of behavior. But again, no one has investigated it. And as you point out, no one else is showing this material.
But Colonel, now wait a minute. We were told by the mainstream media and Zelensky that those Azov Nazi don't exist anymore within the Ukrainian regiment or troops or divisions, whatever they call them over there. Wait a minute. I thought they weren't there. That's fake. That's fake news.
Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of fake news from the capital of fake news, which turns out to be Kiev.
Yeah.
So the second point that you're bringing up is equally important. And I think we need to understand that there has been no accountability in Washington for much of anything for a long time. And the loss of our funds that we've invested is inevitable at this point. We're never going to figure it out. We're never going to know with precision. And the reason why is that there are now 540,000 Russian troops stationed around the outskirts of Ukraine, preparing to launch one of the major offensives that I think will probably end the war in Ukraine. 540,000 Russian troops, 1,000 rocket artillery systems, 5,000 armored fighting vehicles, including at least 1,500 tanks, thousands of guns, hundreds and hundreds of tactical ballistic missiles. Ukraine is now going to experience war on a scale that we have not seen since 1945.
But Doug, we're told they were winning the war.
Make it impossible
I thought Ukraine was winning it. They keep propping Zelensky up like a hero, and that it's almost over.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you mention that, because the Germans are now finally discovering that what they've been told is false. About 40% of Germans polled have now said they know the narrative coming out of Berlin about Russia is false. This is starting to spread across Europe, and we're seeing demonstrations every weekend in Europe that are not being covered once again on the mainstream media here in the United States. They're anti-NATO demonstrations, they're anti-war demonstrations, because the economies of Europe have been destroyed. And by the way, you would think that a lot of Americans would wonder, since they're standing in line at the local food bank trying to get enough food to feed their families, why the president seems so intent in throwing more and more cash at Ukraine, the black hole.
Well, I think we know why, now that we heard about FTX, and there's probably 10 other things they're trying to money launder through, so that we don't have any way to track it. You bring up the Germans, and something interesting about that, their media, as you said, starting to turn as well and cover some reality of that war. I read as well that Ukraine has even been quietly telling people, get the heck out. Winter's going to be so bad. The Russians are surrounding us. We don't have the natural gas and the heat, so get out. Is that factual or not? Because nobody in this country is saying it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And in fact, the Ukrainians are moving many of their military operations centers and command and control further and further west towards the Polish border, because they can't maintain them anywhere else. You're looking at millions of Ukrainians, once again, who, if they don't have relatives in the countryside where they can bunk with them and have wood heaters or wood stoves, then that means they're going to have to head west. And we're going to have millions of Ukrainians on the doorstep of Western Europe shortly.
Wow. So it's a black hole for money laundering. The mainstream media around the globe is lying to citizens of what's actually happening and who's actually winning. And then you have Ukrainian soldiers, possibly these Nazi ones that we were told don't exist anymore, executing who surrendered.